Hello and welcome to another edition of the Ask Dr. Pickel show, where we help find answers for people who have chronic health conditions, chronic health problems that aren't seeming to find answers other ways. So we're going to dive in today with just hopefully something kind of short. And I want to talk more about inflammation. So you hear a lot about inflammation. Hopefully everybody's heard of inflammation, especially if you have a health issue. You've definitely heard about and know about inflammation. But really, what is it? What is inflammation? If someone says, hey, I'm inflamed, what's happening? So, one instance would be like if I got my finger smashed. If I got my finger smashed, it would swell up, look red, maybe even could turn colors like black and blue. So it's potentially inflamed. So we've got to say, well, we know what caused that. It got smashed by something, and then we're getting an inflammatory response. But what is actually occurring in that inflammatory response? And to take it a little deeper, if you have a chronic health condition, an autoimmune condition, what's happening inside your body? It's not like, your thyroid is getting smashed every day. Why is it inflamed and swollen? Why is your pancreas inflamed and swollen? Why is your intestines inflamed and swollen? So, you got to say, why is this inflammatory response going on? And if I smash my finger, after maybe a couple of days or so, it heals up and the inflammation goes down, and then it looks back to normal after a while. And then I forget I even got it smashed. But if you have a chronic condition, an autoimmune condition, you got to take it a little further because, first of all, your finger didn't get smashed. Well, maybe it did, but that's not what's causing your issue most likely. And also, why is the inflammation? Why does it keep going? Why are you chronically inflamed? What's driving this? What's pushing this? And how does that whole thing work? So we're going to get into just some kind of basic details of that, just to let you guys understand that a little better, which I think is pretty important, especially if you're living with these types of conditions and issues. So let's dive right in here. Let me see here. All right. Oh, a little shout out to Svetlana. All right. Good to hear from you, Svetlana. Okay. All right. So let's add this in. And all right. So let's talk about inflammation. Okay. So inflammation. Let's start off at the top of this picture. Let's draw a blood vessel. This could be a vein or artery. Okay, so we've got our blood vessel there. And then let's say there's a bad guy in here, a bacteria. Yeah, so we, of course, we don't want a bunch of bacteria growing in us that aren't under control. We won't get into the whole big part of that. And then down here within our cells too, there's our lymphatics. All right, and lymphatics, this is again kind of like the sewage drain system for our immune system. You hear a lot about blood vessels, capillaries, arteries. You don't hear much about your lymphatic system. It's kind of the lesser talked about thing. But yes, there's this other drainage system in our body called the lymphatic system, and it's mainly utilized by our immune system to get rid of stuff. So we'll kind of talk about that a little here in a moment too. So let's say we've got this, we're getting some growth of some bacteria. We know that our bodies normally have bacteria in them. We actually need bacteria. There's a big percentage of bacteria in our body, and we need them. But the thing is our immune system keeps a balance. And but let's just say, you know, that balance is off, or somehow a new bacteria came in that's not supposed to be in there, a threatening bacteria. So what does our body do about this? I mean, you know, we've got our entire body here. A bacteria, you can only see maybe under a microscope. How does our body recognize that that has entered our system? I mean, we don't visually see it, we don't hear it, we don't smell it. You know, we don't know this bacteria is in there, but somehow our body, our brain knows it's there, and it starts to react. So, you know, it's still not completely known how this occurs, but there are some factors that come into play. There are messenger systems throughout our body, systems basically of certain cells that make messengers, which are really antibodies, or cytokines, they call them. And these cellular messengers communicate between cells throughout the body. And, you know, this communication happens, it can't even be measured. You can't even look at it from a chemistry standpoint because it defies chemistry. It's actually a physics way you have to look at it, because otherwise it's impossible to understand except from a physics standpoint. So, you know, the thing about the human body is it's way really beyond what we even still understand, even though you'd be amazed at how many research papers come out day after day, week after week, month after month, as they dig away and get to the more just minutia of everything you could possibly think of, but still haven't even reached the depth to explain so many things. So I won't get on my soapbox there. But again, so we have this bacteria. So now what's going to happen is there are things that identify these bacteria. And these are these antibodies, these inflammatory cytokines at this point. We have, you know what, let me change this here. Interleukin 10. Now these again have some odd names, TNF alpha, and interleukin 8. Those are probably the main ones. You know what, I wrote 10 here. Let me see if I can find my eraser. I don't know. Yeah, I got one. All right. Okay. So interleukin 6. Okay. So these guys here kind of floating around, they've got some information that helps them to identify what is not you. There's actually more going on than this, but just to give you kind of a generalized view. So, you know, what's going to happen is they send some information out, all these guys. They start to send some signals out. They deliver some messages up into the bloodstream where there are floating around some what are called neutrophils. Okay, so these neutrophils, they're floating around in your bloodstream. These are immune system cells. These are a type of white blood cell, part of the soldiers in your army that help kill bad guys. So these neutrophils go, hey, well, I need my eraser again. All right. So they're like, hey, what's up, guys? And then so the messengers or the delivery of the messenger says, hey, there's a bacteria here, send some help. So these guys come through the blood vessels here at the cellular level. And when they get here, they basically can do something called phagocytosis. And that means they eat cells. They're cell eaters. Let's put it that way. So what they do, let's say it's like a big Pac-Man almost here. Well, I should have drawn his jaw bigger. Okay, so they come over and engulf surround this bacteria, or many of them, maybe they're surrounding a bunch of bacteria, and they kind of glob that up. Now, it's not that they just swallow it. What happens is then they basically release a bunch of enzymes. So these are called lysozymes. Yeah. So I was trying to think of a good example of this. Have you ever seen like maybe a bug that eats other bugs? And it's like, hey, how did that bug digest that other bug when it's in his mouth? I know it sounds gross, but what it does is it releases enzymes. Enzymes break things down. So basically, these enzymes can be pretty powerful. These are like pouring acid on something. I mean, this is pretty strong stuff. So these neutrophils release these enzymes onto this bacteria, and boy, that bacteria just gets decimated. And what it does is it turns into a bunch of debris. So now we've got all this debris hanging out in here. And then what also has to happen is the immune system says, wait a second, okay, you guys are fighting the battle, you've killed it, time to stop. Because if you don't stop the battle, then it keeps going. So then another cellular messenger says, hey guys, it's dead, let's stop the battle. And this one is anti-inflammatory, interleukin 10. Now again, there's more to this too. We'll put a pro here for pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory. Okay, so then this guy comes in and says, hey guys, stop the attack, it's over, good, we're done. So now what do we have left? We've got a bunch of dead material hanging around. It's called debris, cellular debris, which is organic. You can't just leave organic things hanging around anywhere. I mean, what happens if you leave food in your refrigerator too long? It starts to rot, starts to create problems, and stuff starts to grow on it. It's a magnet for bad things. So what happens in the human body if we have a bunch of debris hanging out? Our body does not like that. It doesn't like dead cells. It doesn't like debris hanging out within your body. Our houses, our bodies are pretty darn clean, to tell you the truth. I mean, it doesn't matter how many times you wash your hands. Really, we keep ourselves clean inside by our own system, if it's working right. So then what happens is there's another cell that gets activated. Let's say a few of these guys, and these guys are called monocytes. We have monocytes and neutrophils here. These are these monocytes. So now what's interesting is you can see these levels. If you get a blood test done, if you get a complete blood count done with a differential, which is a pretty common blood test, you'll be able to see the numbers of these types of cells: monocytes, neutrophils, lymphocytes, eosinophils, these types of white blood cells and their counts. It's like, are they elevated in my blood? Are they too low? Are they, so we can find out more about that information of is there something active going on of these types of white blood cells? But back to this. So we've got these monocytes, and these monocytes, think of them as the trash trucks of your immune system. Now, what their job is they're going to go in here and say, hey, time to do our job. Let's start to clean up. And they will start to get rid of this stuff and haul it off. And where they take it is to the dump, to the sewer. So then they make their way to the lymphatic system and dump it off. The lymphatic system drains it out of there. It isn't a fast process, but it drains it out of there. All right. Now, here's the thing. Let's go back to our cellular debris here. We've got a bunch of dead stuff here. All right. and there was that that cell, that neutrophil that was engulfing that our Pac-Man here. So let's say something occurs here. Now, here's the thing, is once this neutrophil comes in and engulfs that, it's got a half-life, meaning it can only live so long. It can only hang out so long before the trash trucks come, because there's a time between when the monocytes do their thing and come in and do the cleanup process. Now, this is usually, this half-life is about 6 to 10 hours. Okay, so if in 6 to 10 hours this mess isn't cleaned up, that's a problem. So let's say you have this occur, you sleep overnight, you wake up the next morning, the trash men did not do their job. Uh-oh, this is a problem, because now what do we have? We've got cellular debris. We've got debris from this bacteria. Well, let's call it organic debris hanging out in your system. And your body's like, no, we can't do that. That's, where's the trash trucks and why aren't they working? So this is a problem that can be encountered in chronic inflammation. And let me show you how. So we've got all our cellular debris here. It's hanging out. I mean, it could be a lot more than this. And then what happens is it's just hanging out. So then these guys over here, these messengers, these pro-inflammatory cytokines, antibodies, they say, hey, what's going on here? We've got a mess going on. So call the neutrophils again, tell them there's a problem, give them a call. All right, so then they go, what? Again? So then they come back down here and start attacking. We get another Pac-Man attacking dead tissue, a dead neutrophil, or neutrophils. Again, imagine this on a grander scale. And then still, there's some things that maybe aren't working here. Maybe the signaling isn't working. The anti-inflammatory side of the immune system is not working properly, so we aren't getting signaling to the monocytes, or the monocytes are having some issues there. They're low in their populations, their ability to function. And we'll talk about what can cause that here in a second too. But you can kind of get my gist, because what if this is happening over and over and over in your body, this cycle going on and on and on? Chronic inflammation, chronic problem. Now, here's another side to this, is if we have all these cellular debris hanging out long enough, these antibodies and even some other antibodies will come in and say, you know what? Let's not only keep attacking this because we know and think it's a bad guy, but we know some other bad guys that kind of look like this. And we think your thyroid kind of looks like this. In fact, you already have antibodies to your thyroid. You already have Hashimoto's. So as we're attacking this, let's increase the attack on your thyroid. Let's say you have celiac disease. Your immune system says, you know what? While we're attacking this and the immune system's on red alert already, let's go ahead and attack the wall of the small intestine more. So this is how other things can increase the attack on you if you have an autoimmune condition. Or something like this could drive an increased attack on your joints if you have rheumatoid arthritis. So the thing is as long as there's stuff like this going on, inflammatory events going on in your body, it just generates not only more inflammation locally where this is occurring, but even globally where it thinks there may be another problem. Or if you're chronically inflamed and you don't have an autoimmune condition, just being chronically inflamed can start to cause inflammation to spread. And this material can start to float around. Sometimes it could get potentially, let's say it was already in your bloodstream, it starts to float around, or it starts to go into different cellular areas and it moves with circulation, moves in your lymphatic system and creates problems too. So again, there's all these potential problems. And this doesn't just have to be a bacteria. There's a lot of infectious agents. Let's say this is Lyme disease. Let's say this is a fungus. let's say, I mean, again, there's so many potentials for this, but this is kind of a basic mechanism of how this works and how it can go wrong. Now, what can generate this? What can cause some of these problems here? Well, there are things that can cause malfunctions in your system as a whole. One of those, which is at the top of most of the lists on my videos, how did that happen? There we go. Our blood sugar issues. So if you got a blood sugar issue, you immediately start to have problems. If you're getting insulin surges, that in itself is creating inflammatory events. You know, especially if you're taking insulin, there's no way to gauge exactly how much your body needs, and you usually take too much and it overrides. Now, it's too much, and it's like pouring gas on a fire. And again, if your blood sugar drops low, this can cause problems too. So any changes in blood sugar or blood sugar instability can cause issues there. Another factor that can affect things is stress. Stress, physical, emotional, chemical, stress or traumas, let's put it that way. These can increase inflammation and cause malfunctions here, okay? But really, we're just looking at things that increase inflammation. And then another thing could be foods, especially if you already know you have a food issue. Let's say you have an issue with gluten and you eat a bunch of it. Yeah, it's going to make you feel lousy. That's you just poured gas on a fire. You created inflammation. And then let's say toxins. These could be chemicals. These could be things that you even think aren't bad. Let's say solvents and cleaners. You know, there's being a lot of solvents and cleaners used right now because of the whole coronavirus thing. And so again, but these solvents and cleaners can be toxic in themselves. There's a lot of things in our environment that we're surrounded with day after day, chemical wise, that can be extremely toxic for our system. And then of course, what we've kind of been talking about, infections. And then also another thing too is hypoxia. What is hypoxia? Hypoxia is a lack of oxygen. So this could be due to maybe you have an anemia, maybe you aren't getting oxygen to cells, maybe you have blood vessel damage, or maybe you have bad perfusion. So again, you're not getting oxygen to areas that are supposed to be in this. That could be due to like a issue with nitric oxide, or there's so many possibilities here. And this is what we do. You know, in our office, we look at these different factors and say, wait a second, where could this be? How could this be a problem? What type of problem is actually going on here? And what do we do to fix it? These issues are all things that can be handled. And usually it's never just one, usually it's more than one. Now kind of back to this. So we've got this whole thing kind of spinning out of control. It isn't working. You know, the immune system's not doing things properly. And we'll see this even more common with autoimmune conditions because there's kind of a balance to the immune system called Th1 and Th2. And this can cause a definite tilt in what's called the teeter-totter. And so now, let's say your pro-inflammatory side, your Th1 side of the immune system, your SWAT team's working all the time. The anti-inflammatory side not doing its job at all. Now, it can also be reversed, where you're not attacking things at all. They're thriving, and the anti-inflammatory side of your system is kind of shutting everything down. So there is a reverse on that. We won't talk about that right now. So if we start to see these types of issues, yeah, we can do a blood test, not only to look at your white blood cells, because again, remember those neutrophils, those monocytes, those are called white blood cells. And sometimes we'll see that neutrophils are really high. Maybe white blood cell, maybe monocytes are really low, or maybe monocytes are really high too, but they are not functioning properly in the environment because they're cleaning up so much. But again, removing that cellular debris is crucial. So we've got our white blood cells that we can look at on blood tests. And then we can also look at to measure inflammation, or try to. inflammation doesn't always show up on blood tests. It's pretty amazing. There's only so many tests for inflammation. There's really not very many tests for inflammation. And the ones that are there, sometimes they'll show positive, sometimes they won't. And we'll see that happen all the time. But some common ones that you might see in either our blood work or hopefully on the blood work of some of your other doctors are C-reactive protein, also called CRP. Another one called CRP HS. The HS means high specificity. Now, again, a lot of maybe your cardiologist will run that more, and they'll say, oh, that's related to heart inflammation. Actually, no, it can be related to any type of inflammation in the body. And that's the thing, is a lot of these inflammatory markers are general for anywhere in the body. There's another one called Fibrinogen. Now, this is not only a marker for inflammation, but this increases if you have a higher risk for blood clot too, which is never a good thing. And then another one called Homocysteine. And then there's some newer markers too that you might hear more about, or hopefully some doctors run. This is more in the newer research. There's one called glycate. There's another one called TGF-B. So there's these markers, and so these may be things that that you want to make sure that when you get your blood tested, that you get run, that your doctors are looking at these inflammation markers and saying, yeah, the person's inflamed, and then you can kind of get a baseline of where's my inflammation at. That way you have an initial baseline, and then you can look at this in the future to say, hey, is it getting better? When we retest my blood work in 2 months, 3 months, have these inflammation markers dropped? Am I improving? Even though maybe my symptoms are still there, maybe my inflammation is really going down, or maybe my symptoms are great, but my inflammation is still up. So again, there's so many possibilities here that can occur. But what are things that we can do to kind of help with this inflammation? I'm kind of running out of room here, so let's. Okay, so remember those guys called monocytes, the trash trucks that help clean up things. So one thing that they do, or that activates them, are called resolvents. And don't worry about that word. Just know that there's two types of resolvents. There's E and D. Now, what activates the E or helps it out a lot? What do you need to help that out, to get these guys going? You have to have EPA. I'm going to talk about this in just a second. And what do you need to get the D side going? DHA. So what is EPA and what is DHA? These are essential fatty acids. Yeah, these are those good fats and oils that you need. Those good fats and oils help these monocytes out. So that's why sometimes people will take these oils, and this is how they become anti-inflammatory that you always hear about. Now, some people will take, and some people are going to maybe get mad at me about this, but some people will take fish oil to get these nutrients. I totally disagree. Fish oil, no matter what company it is, it's, I hate to say corrupt stuff. It has mercury in it, organic mercury. There's no way to get that stuff out of there, no matter how organic or where your fish were raised in the ocean. They're going to have mercury toxicity, and it only has to be reported if it's over a certain amount. If it's under a certain amount, you don't have to report it, and it could be like 0.001523. And that amount of mercury is not going to harm anybody. Well, it will if you aren't a good detoxifier and you have some other health problems or an autoimmune condition. So I'm not the biggest on fish oil. What I really like for this is called algae oil. Yeah. So just remember, a lot of your mercury is in fish that are at the top of the food chain. Where you're not going to see mercury is the things they feed on, the things that are at the bottom of the food chain, like algae. So algae oil, great. The neat part about algae oil is you don't really have to refrigerate it because it doesn't go rancid. If you leave your fish oil pills out and they get warm, they go rancid. But this algae oil does not. Algae oil also can get to a higher temperature. So, but again, algae oil, great source of EPA, DHA. Now, what are some other things that can maybe help out here too? Some anti-inflammatory type botanicals, turmeric, resveratrol. Now, the thing about it, especially with turmeric, turmeric does not absorb easily through the gut. If you take most turmeric supplements, they're going to end up in the toilet. They're not going to absorb and utilize very well. I recommend a liposomal type, a type that your body can actually absorb and use. So these, and more of a liquid type will tend to do better in my experience. So liposomal turmerics, liposomal resveratrols, I tend to like these more. And there's some companies who make some really good ones that I like to use. Glutathione. Now, glutathione is something your body already makes as an anti-inflammatory. But again, if you have chronic inflammation, you can't recycle it fast enough, your levels drop low, so then the fire keeps going in the house, kind of like the situation we saw. So again, taking glutathione can be helpful. Again, another thing that doesn't absorb well, so you want a liposomal form. It's probably the better form of this. And there's some great ones out there. Another thing that our body makes is called superoxide dismutase. You can buy this in a supplement form. Is this usually a problem? No, usually the body can keep up with this. Nitric oxide, or NOS. So nitric oxide is something else our body uses to help with inflammation. Now there's there's 3 types of nitric oxide. 2 of them are anti-inflammatory. One is actually pro-inflammatory. One way to increase this is with an amino acid called arginine. But if you already have chronic inflammation and you take arginine, you do run the risk of creating too much of the inducible nitric oxide, the INOS, and this could actually create more inflammation. So there's other ways to increase nitric oxide in the body, supplement-wise, that don't involve arginine. And I would actually suggest those if you have a chronic health problem. If you don't have a chronic health problem or an autoimmune condition, then you can, probably have no problem with it. And actually, nitric oxide does all kinds of great stuff. So again, these can kind of help to put out the fire in the house and decrease some of the inflammatory effects of your immune system attacking these debris fields over and over and over, because these debris fields have to be cleared. So again, try increasing algae oil to get some of that debris fields out. And then again, if you do have an autoimmune issue or a chronic health issue, we have to look at that immune system further and find out, do you have a Th1, Th2 imbalance? Because again, let's say that you really don't know what's going on in your body. Yeah, you've got some health issues and you think it's inflammation, you don't know, but maybe the anti-inflammatory side of your immune system is working overtime. Maybe you have Th2 dominance. Let's put that at you. And then you start to take some of this stuff, it will make you worse. You just took that teeter-totter and tilted it the wrong way further. Now, also on the other line of that, and then also you have to put on here antioxidants, again, which can help you or hurt you depending on the skew of your immune system. But let's say you're fighting something, you're not winning the battle, and you aren't making enough monocytes, and you think, gosh, I've got this chronic infection, I'm going to go take some echinacea. I'm going to go take some immune system boosting herb or tea to help me fight the battle more. Well, maybe the situation is going on like we talked about, where you just can't clear the debris. You just made yourself worse. You just increased inflammation. You gave your immune system more fuel to fight a battle that it couldn't clean up the dead bodies from. And now you just pushed more inflammation and you just made yourself worse. I'm just giving you these other case scenarios because sometimes if you do these things and you do things based on things you find on Google or in books or, things like that, if you have an autoimmune condition or a chronic health condition, you do run the risk of making yourself worse. What we try to do is look at this a little more in depth and find out what is going on in your body. We aren't treating inflammation, we are treating you. We're not treating your diagnosis, Hashimoto's, Crohn's colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis. We're not treating those diagnoses. That's just a label that's been put on you to say, hey, this person has this. Here's the drugs you can use. No, we are treating what is underlying this, what's causing the inflammation in the first place, what's at the bottom of this. And that's really what we have to look at. So I hope everybody enjoyed today and that information helped out. And do not hesitate to share us on Facebook or YouTube. And let me grab this here. But please do share us. Please share us to the world. We want people to get this information. I think it can be very helpful to so many people. And I hope everybody enjoyed today. And I'd like to thank everybody that is watching today. Hi, Jody. Hi, Justina. All right. You guys have a great weekend. And let's see here. Let me go to this. And God bless.